Ethan. You're on your own now, my mom said, tossing my stuff outside. Fine, I'll remember this, I whispered as I shut the door behind me. 6 months later, they were broke and I wasn't picking up. I'm Ethan, 18 years old, and in my parents' eyes, I'm a huge failure. Not because I did something wrong, no criminal history, no bad habits, nothing like that. My only mistake was choosing not to enroll in college immediately. Instead, I wanted to focus on my freelance career, something I had been developing since my high school days, and honestly, I was doing quite well. I wasn't making a fortune yet, but I earned enough to support myself. I had regular clients, consistent work, and most importantly, I genuinely enjoyed it. But my parents? They despised it. You won't get anywhere without a degree, my mom would remind me at least twice a week. You're just throwing away your future. Do you seriously believe this tiny side business will sustain you forever? My dad would chime in, you're just an irresponsible child, refusing to face reality. I told them I wasn't against higher education. I just didn't want to rush into it. If my business collapsed, I'd reconsider college, but for now, I was betting on myself. They did not approve. At the same time, my older brother, Jacob, was dealing with financial trouble. He and his wife, Hannah, were struggling to afford their rent. Jacob wasn't exactly the most responsible person, and Hannah had expensive preferences. They had already borrowed money from my parents multiple times. Though my parents constantly complained about it, they always gave in and handed over more cash. Then one day, I arrived home to find my mom going through my belongings. What are you doing?" I asked. She didn't even glance at me. "We need to talk immediately." I got a bad feeling. She led me to the living room where my dad and Jacob's you were already seated. Hannah was nowhere to be seen, probably busy with whatever she usually did. My mom cleared her throat. "Ethan, you know things have been rough for Jacob and Hannah. They need some stability right now." I just stared. "Okay," my dad sighed, as though I was being difficult. "We've decided that Jacob and Hannah will move in. They need a place to stay, and it doesn't make sense for them to struggle when we have extra space." I blinked. You'll manage just fine." "Ethan," my mom said in her usual condescending voice, "you're 18. You can find a place to live. You're making your own money, aren't you?" I was so stunned I couldn't even react right away. They were kicking me out just like that. "But this is my room," I finally said. "I live here." "You don't contribute anything, Ethan." Jacob had cut in, arms crossed like he was the one being inconvenienced. "I'm struggling, and I actually have a family to take care of." I almost laughed. "Hannah doesn't even work, and you keep blowing money on useless things. How is that my responsibility?" My mom shot me a sharp look. "Ethan, stop being selfish. You're not our priority anymore. Jacob and Hannah need this more than you do." Then, to drive the point home, she grabbed one of my duffel bags and tossed it toward the door. "Start packing," she said. I turned to my dad, hoping, just hoping, he'd at least try to reason with her. But no, he simply nodded, like this was a completely rational decision. I could have argued. I could have pleaded. But something inside me just shifted. I stood up. "Fine," I said. I packed my things, whatever I could carry, and walked out. I didn't cry. I didn't even say goodbye. If they wanted to treat me like I didn't matter, I'd return the favor. For a while, I stayed at a friend's place and threw myself into work. 6 months passed, and I didn't hear a single word from them. No calls, no texts, not even a passive-aggressive Facebook post about how young people these days have no respect in their minds. I was out of sight, out of mind, and honestly, that was perfectly fine by me. In those 6 months, my life transformed completely. I went from barely scraping by to making more money than I ever imagined at my age. The kind of income that made me laugh at the idea of ever needing to borrow from my parents or anyone else again. In the beginning, I was just doing freelance work, but then I got smarter. I started delegating tasks, built a brand, and before I realized it, I had a fully functioning business, a thriving one. A business that didn't just cover my expenses. It allowed me to move into a stunning apartment, buy my dream setup, and most importantly, never stress about money again. That was around the time my parents suddenly remembered I existed. It started with an unexpected text from my mom. "Hey, sweetheart, how have you been?" I had to double-check my phone to make sure I wasn't imagining things. This was the same woman who just 6 months earlier had tossed my belongings out like I was some tenant who had failed to pay rent. I chose not to respond. A few days later, another text came through. Ethan. "It's been a while. We miss you. Why don't you come over for dinner?" Miss me? That was amusing because I didn't recall them missing me when I was struggling to carry my things out in a duffel bag. Once again, I ignored the message. Then the calls began. Initially, I let them go unanswered, but after the 5th call in a single day, curiosity got the best of me, and I picked up. "Hello?" Mom's voice came through, overly cheerful. "Oh, Ethan, it's so wonderful to hear your voice. We were just talking about you." I responded flatly. "Uh-huh." There was a pause before she continued. "Well, we just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. Maybe you could stop by sometime." I smirked. "You mean my old house?" An awkward silence followed before my dad cleared his throat in the background. Ethan. "We know things were a little rough before, but we're still family, and family supports one another." Oh, that line was golden. I repeated his words slowly. "Family supports one another. That's interesting because I don't recall much support when you kicked me out to give Jacob my room." Mom sighed as if I was the one being unreasonable. Ethan. "Well, that's in the past. At the time, we thought it was the best choice, but we miss you now." "And this sudden concern for me has nothing to do with the fact that I'm doing well now?" I asked. "Of course not," Mom answered far too quickly. "But well, since you mentioned it, we did hear that things have been going great for you. You know, your aunt ran into one of your former teachers, and they mentioned how proud they were of you. Isn't that wonderful?" There it was. They had no clue what I was actually doing, but they'd heard enough to figure out that I wasn't struggling. Now they were trying to slip their way back into my life. Still, I decided to play along. "Huh, that is interesting," I said. Mom let out a nervous chuckle. "Yes, so why don't you stop by for dinner? I'll make your favorite meal, and we can all catch up." I pretended to think about it. "I'm not sure, Mom. Is there even space for me? I mean, Jacob and Hannah are still living there, right?" Silence. Then, in a much quieter tone, she muttered, "Well, about that." I raised an eyebrow. "What about it?" Dad let out a heavy sigh before admitting, "They moved out." I nearly burst out laughing. Of course they did. I prompted, "Waiting for more?" Mom hesitated before finally confessing, "Things have been a little tough. Your father's hours at work were reduced, and we've been covering Jacob's rent ever since he moved out. We're falling behind on expenses, and we—" "That's not my issue," I cut in. "You made it perfectly clear that I wasn't part of this family anymore, so now you're no longer my responsibility either."